Hi, I'm Nicholas McGurr, author of The Afterlife and host for Stories in a Cemetery. You can find all my fiction works with themes of the afterlife on nicholasmcgurr.com. That's NicholasMcGirr.com. As a writer, I do research, and that research is more than likely inside a haunted location or a cemetery. Like you, I'm curious about the afterlife, and always looking for a new topic for my next book. I hope you enjoy this episode of my research as much as I did in using it for my fiction works. Let's get into today's Story in the Cemetery. Hey guys, welcome to episode 26 of Stories in a Cemetery. This month it is another discussion with Byron McFarland on The Secret here in Charleston. You get to hear where we are with our hunt, where we are with getting permission to dig or probe, and we also discuss a couple of other theories that are floating around the internet in the threads right now with verse 5 and the Charleston image. We also talk a little bit about verse 6 and the Charleston image and what we're going to do if we're wrong. What happens if in the fact that we get to probe and or dig and we're wrong? Do we start over? We still haven't decided yet, but you can listen to some of the discussion that Brian and I have on this month's The Secret in Charleston, episode 26. So to hear the full episode, head over to buymeacoffee.com and make sure you drop a buck in the coffee pot. Folks, these are bonus episodes for you, for those that support the show, and for anybody that is looking to support my craft of writing and ghost hunting on the streets of Charleston. So folks, I do appreciate your support, and this is turning more of just a documentation of, in the event we do find the cask by Byron Preiss, here's how we did it. Here was our thought process. Here's what we did and what we're going to do after we do find the cask. So folks, we are still really confident that we are onto something really good with this. So if you want to follow along and make sure that you don't miss a beat on what we're doing with trying to find Byron Preiss's cask right here in Charleston, drop a buck in the coffee pot on buymeacoffee.com. There'll be a link in the show notes. Here is a very short snippet of what happened in this month's discussion. Thanks, guys. All right, everybody. Welcome to episode 26 of Stories in a Cemetery. This is the bonus episode where Byron McFarland and I discuss The Secret in Charleston, South Carolina, based on Byron Preiss's book. So if you haven't been following along, welcome. We encourage that you have contributed to supporting Stories in the Cemetery, and hopefully you will enjoy the show. And I'm going to apologize ahead of time, only because I have some new friends in my office, and the birds like to chirp from time to time. So not only do I have two dogs running around with their tags jingling, but now I have two birds sitting right next to me, and they may tend to chime in. So Brian, if I pause, it's only so I can edit out the birds. So
right.
Welcome.
It's like a zoo, like the zoo that was at Hampton Park.
Hampton Park. Is that today's discussion? I think it will be. So
well, I think we definitely need to do it because, like we talked, we take all the skills that we've learned on what we did and apply it to another solution, and then I can, right before we kind of went on the air, man, I'm from the 70s. SITC is on the air.
That's right.
We were talking about how, one city and the associated, and so the reason I wanted to kind of bring it in here was there was a discussion as to that there was no French version of The Secret book, even though there's Canadian pricing. But apparently he did say that one of the casks was buried in Canada.
Yes, yeah, and that's obviously believed to be in Montreal. And I think, listeners are fans of The Secret and are looking for each of the remaining 9 casks will agree that Montreal is definitely a location. However, I'm still going to be very confident and a firm believer that our verse 5 solve is underway, and it is going to prove to be true even though verse 5 is commonly associated with the Montreal painting. And you actually sent me a link with a very promising, I guess, solve with verse 5 and number in Montreal. So I guess if we want to take a quick look at this, my only concern really after reading the article that you sent me was the 222 being in Roman numerals on one of the buildings that's allegedly close to where this person believes a cask to be buried.
Right.
Do you know what I'm referring to with the X and the two like pieces next to it? I guess they're like boards or slats. And go ahead.
What's kind of interesting is our 222 solve is sensible,
Yes.
but it's not as clear cut as that. But it has several. Well, and this is something that I was going to say when we get into the Hampton Park solve, is that we've reiterated, and several people have reiterated on the web, that the whole point there was to get us out of our armchairs and into the world. And I think that I don't see how you could really come up close to the solution without doing kind of what we did, is just walk and point at something in the picture and then point at something in the world.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. So, I mean, with that being said, edit. That is my alarm for me to check tours.
Nice.
It is 7:20. But with that in mind, I mean, looking at the pictures on this article, and folks, this is on mysteriousratings.com. In search of the Montreal cask of the secret armchair treasure hunt. 6 questions with Evan Hoovler. So if you wanted to reference the article that we're talking about, you can actually go take a look at it for yourself, and you can actually see where we're at. So with that said, the 222, and we're going to get to Hampton Square, Brian, I promise. But
I'm just excited.
You're excited about it, and this one actually looks like they got boots on the ground as well. Like there's lots of pictures, lots of edited pictures with writing on it, so that way they could show where the leg eater is and all of those other things.
Yeah.
But again, that 222, because it was such a eye-opening solve for us, that's really the only piece that I look for when I'm seeing these other solves with verse 5, and theirs is pretty it's pretty convincing. I'll say that.
Yeah.
But I'm still convinced that ours is better. Thanks so much for listening to today's Story in a Cemetery. Be sure to check out the show notes with pictures and bonus audio sections on nicholasmcgurr.com. As you know, I'm a writer, and now you have another story that inspires me to write my fiction works. Be sure to share this episode on your social media or leave me comments on the Stories in a Cemetery Facebook page. I'll see you next time with another Story in the Cemetery.